The dead don't get buried on Everest. They become landmarks. More than 200 bodies remain on the mountain's slopes, some visible from the established climbing routes, preserved by cold and altitude for decades. This is not a failure of rescue operations. It is a physical reality. Above 8,000 meters, recovering a corpse requires more resources, risk, and oxygen than most expeditions carry. The so-called death zone begins where the atmosphere stops cooperating with human biology. At that altitude, air contains roughly a third of the oxygen available at sea level. The body begins to deteriorate in real time, not over years, but over hours. Judgment fails before strength does. Climbers have made the summit and then, on the descent, simply sat down and stopped moving. Some were found within meters of fixed ropes that could have saved them. Everest's death toll stands at well over 300 confirmed fatalities, and the true number is likely higher. What makes the mountain particularly dangerous is not any single threat, but the combination. Altitude sickness, rapid weather shifts, exhaustion, frostbite, and the psychological distortion that comes with oxygen deprivation. A storm can build in under an hour. Temperatures can drop 60 degrees in a single afternoon, and yet the mountain remains open. Each spring season, hundreds of permits are issued. Commercial expeditions guide clients with limited high-altitude experience to the summit. Some succeed, some do not come back. The bodies of those who didn't are still there, frozen in place, serving as the most brutal possible reminder that standing on the highest point on Earth has always come at a cost that cannot be fully calculated in advance. There are more than 200 dead bodies on Mount Everest, and most of them will never be moved. That is not neglect. That is physics, economics, and the brutal arithmetic of survival above 8,000 meters. Number 13 on our list is a place climbers call Rainbow Valley. A stretch of the northeast ridge where the dead have accumulated for decades, their brightly coloured downsuits slowly fading in the high-altitude ultraviolet, but never fully disappearing. Red, orange, blue, yellow. The colours gave the valley its name. The beauty of the name is the cruelest part of it. Above 8,000 meters, the human body enters what physiologists call the death zone. Oxygen pressure drops to 1/3 of sea level. Judgment erodes. Hallucinations become routine. The body begins to consume itself faster than it can recover, and every step requires a conscious act of will rather than instinct. In these conditions, when someone collapses, the margin for rescue is nearly zero. Recovering a body from this altitude is a separate expedition in its own right. It demands a team of trained climbers, specialized rigging, a window of stable weather, and an investment of tens of thousands of dollars. It also carries a genuine risk of adding more bodies to the slope. So the fallen stay where they fell, and the mountain has become an open-air cemetery, not by intention, but by impossibility. The most documented case is David Sharp, who died in 2006 in a shallow cave just meters from the main route, while multiple groups passed by without stopping. His case forced a global reckoning with what obligation, if any, a climber owes another in extremis. Rainbow Valley is the endpoint of that question. It is the place where human ambition meets an absolute physical limit, and the limit wins every time. Number 12 on our list is a place where you can walk into a lush green valley and be dead before you realize anything is wrong. No warning signs, no visible fumes, no dramatic landscape of scorched earth or steaming vents. Just low shrubs, soft moss, a quiet stream, and silence. This is the Valley of Death on Russia's Kamchatka Peninsula, located within the Kronotsky Nature Reserve, one of the oldest strictly protected wilderness areas in the country. It sits in the shadow of the Kikpanich volcano, and for most of its recorded history, it was simply a place where animals went in and didn't come out. Soviet wildlife researcher Vladimir Leonov first documented the valley in 1933 after stumbling upon a scatter of dead animals with no obvious explanation. Expeditions that followed found hundreds of carcasses: bears, foxes, eagles, ravens, rodents, all drawn in by the stream or the scent of something edible, none of them leaving on their own. The cause turned out to be a slow, invisible leak from fissures in the ground. Hydrogen sulfide, hydrogen cyanide, and cyanogen chloride seeping continuously into the lowest pockets of the terrain. Those pockets are exactly where animals put their heads, to drink, to sniff the ground, to investigate. The gases are heavier than air, so they pool near the surface rather than dispersing upward. Concentration varies across the valley, but in the hollow zones it can reach lethal levels in seconds. In still weather, there is no smell, not because the gas is absent, but because the olfactory receptors shut down before the brain registers any alert. The warning system fails at the precise moment it's needed most. Human fatalities have been recorded here, including researchers who entered without adequate protective equipment. Looking at the valley from the outside, nothing suggests what it is. The beauty is intact and entirely genuine. The lethality is equally real, just invisible. That gap between what a place looks like and what it actually does to a living body will carry us directly to number 11, a narrow stretch of water in the English county of Yorkshire, which local communities have quietly avoided for centuries. Every person who has ever fallen into the Strid has died. Not most of them, every single one. That is not local legend or exaggeration. It is the documented historical record of a 2-metre wide stream in North Yorkshire, England, on the grounds of Bolton Abbey, and it is the reason this stretch of the River Wharfe earns its place at number 11 on this list. The name comes from the Old English word for stride. You can step across it. Tourists do exactly that, positioning themselves on the mossy limestone banks for photographs, while children eye the gap and calculate the jump. The water looks shallow, calm, almost inviting between its rocky walls draped in green. None of that is real. What you see at the surface is a fraction of the actual river. Over thousands of years, the wharf has carved an elaborate branching network of caves and grottos deep into the limestone beneath your feet. The true width of the river here is not 2 meters, it is several dozen. The vast majority of the water moves underground, through chambers no one has ever mapped completely. That subterranean system operates under intense hydraulic pressure, generating powerful reverse currents and vortices that leave no trace on the surface above. You cannot see them, you cannot predict them, and the banks of the Strid overhang the water like stone eaves, curving outward just enough to make it physically impossible to grip the edge if you fall in. The first written record of a death here dates to the 12th century, when young William de Mesquines drowned at this spot. His mother built Bolton Abbey in grief. The deaths have continued without interruption ever since. From the riverbanks of Yorkshire, our next entry takes us to the opposite end of the world, where the danger rises not from water, but from the ground itself. Fraser Island is stunning, and that's precisely what makes it so dangerous. Number 10 on our list. This landmass off the coast of Queensland in northeastern Australia holds a geological record. It is the largest pure sand island on Earth, stretching 123 kilometres along its length. But the soft white beaches and the freshwater lakes that sit impossibly blue in the middle of the dunes do something insidious. They lower your guard. The island operates on multiple lethal frequencies at once. In the water, tiger sharks and great white sharks patrol the coastal shallows. Rip currents along the eastern shoreline are powerful enough to carry a swimmer into open ocean within minutes, and formal rescue infrastructure is essentially absent. Then there is the Irukandji jellyfish, a creature roughly the size of a thumbnail, nearly invisible in the water, and responsible for one of the most disorienting venomous syndromes known to medicine. The sting itself is barely felt. 20 to 30 minutes later, the syndrome begins. Escalating pain across the back, chest, and joints. a documented psychological sensation of impending doom, hypertensive crisis, and potential cardiac arrest. On land, the dingoes of Fraser Island are not the cautious animals found on the mainland. This isolated population is genetically distinct and significantly more aggressive. Attacks on humans are recorded. In 2001, a pack killed a 9-year-old child, and the island's official visitor rules now explicitly prohibit leaving children unsupervised. What Fraser Island demonstrates is a compounding logic of danger. No single threat defines it. The sharks, the currents, the jellyfish, the dingoes, they occupy different zones, different times of day, different environments. There is no single precaution that covers all of them. That is what places it on this list. Mount Washington has killed more than 150 people. It is not even close to the tallest mountain in North America. At 6,288 feet, roughly 1,917 meters, it barely registers on a continental scale. There is a paved road to the summit. There is a cog railway that has been running since 1869. There is a gift shop and a cafeteria at the top. And on any given weekend in summer, American families drive up and let their kids pose for photographs in the clouds. So how does a place like this end up at number 9 on this list? The answer is wind. Specifically, the wind recorded on April 12, 1934, at 231 miles per hour, or 372 kilometers per hour. That single measurement stood as the world record for surface weather stations for more than 6 decades. It remains among the highest values ever documented anywhere on Earth. The physics behind it are straightforward once you understand the location. 3 of North America's major storm tracks converge directly over this ridge in the White Mountains of New Hampshire, and the shape of the terrain compresses and accelerates the airflow like a natural wind tunnel. The summit sits in cloud cover roughly 300 days per year. Temperatures drop below freezing in every month of the calendar, including July and August. And the critical detail, the one that turns a tourist destination into a death trap, is the speed of change. Weather on Mount Washington does not deteriorate over hours. It deteriorates over minutes. A hiker who sets out in sunshine and a t-shirt at 9 in the morning can be inside a full whiteout blizzard with wind strong enough to knock them off their feet before 10 o'clock. Hypothermia follows quickly. The mountain's weather observatory has carried the same slogan on its wall for decades. Home of the world's worst weather. Not a boast, not a metaphor, a measured, documented claim. The next location on this list presents a different kind of extreme, one that does not hide itself in fog or arrive without warning, but sits in plain sight, shimmering in colors that have no business existing in nature. Berkeley Pit is a tourist attraction. You pay a small fee, walk to the observation platform, and look down at a body of water so still it could pass for a lake on a postcard. If you ignore the rust-orange color and the bare, corroded rock surrounding it. That tension between the ordinary and the lethal is exactly what makes this place one of the most quietly disturbing industrial sites in the United States. Ranking number 8. The pit is the remnant of an open-cut copper mine that operated in Butte, Montana from 1955 to 1980, one of the largest in the world at its peak. The excavation reaches nearly 500 meters deep. When mining ended and the dewatering pumps were shut off, groundwater began rising into the void. Over the following decades, it accumulated into a reservoir holding approximately 150 billion litres. But the chemistry of that accumulation is the critical part. Water moving through sulfide rock formations generates sulfuric acid, and sulfuric acid dissolves heavy metals. The result is a liquid loaded with arsenic, cadmium, zinc, lead, and copper, with a pH of around 2.5, roughly equivalent to vinegar, and toxin concentrations hundreds of times above safe thresholds. The scale of the danger became impossible to ignore in November 2016, when a flock of snow geese, disoriented by a blizzard during their annual migration, landed on the surface of the pit. Several thousand birds died within a single night. Necropsies revealed catastrophic internal burns. The incident moved Berkeley Pit from a regional environmental footnote into international headlines. The site is now a federally designated Superfund location under EPA oversight. The water level continues to rise, roughly 30 centimetres per year, and there is a defined critical elevation beyond which acid will begin migrating into Butte's groundwater system. The process is chemical, gradual, and on any geological timescale, it cannot be stopped. The deadliest dive site on Earth doesn't hide. It sits wide open at the surface, a dark blue circle roughly 60 metres across, surrounded by shallow turquoise water, accessible directly from the shore. No boat required, no technical barrier to entry, just a vertical shaft dropping 130 metres into the seabed off the northeastern coast of the Sinai Peninsula. The Blue Hole of Dahab, Egypt, is number 7 on our list, and its danger is inseparable from how approachable it looks. The site is coastal karst, a natural limestone shaft cut directly into a Red Sea coral reef. The visibility is exceptional. The marine life is genuinely spectacular. For decades, these qualities drew divers from across the world, experienced and recreational alike. And for decades, the site returned a steady count of bodies, or failed to return them at all. The official death toll stands at approximately 200. Unofficial estimates run significantly higher. Memorial plaques on the shore bear inscriptions in dozens of languages. The mechanism that kills is not the depth itself. At 55 metres, a tunnel opens in the wall of the shaft, an arch roughly 26 metres long connecting the blue hole to open sea. Divers call it the Arch. On paper, it is reachable. In practice, any diver breathing standard compressed air has already passed into serious neurological impairment well before they arrive. Nitrogen narcosis begins affecting judgment around 40 metres. The symptoms are disarmingly familiar. The cognitive fog and misplaced confidence of intoxication, a dissolving awareness of risk, the unearned certainty that everything is fine, and the next few meters are manageable. Hundreds of divers followed that certainty deeper than they had planned, deeper than their gas supply could support, and did not come back up. The particular cruelty of the blue hole is what happens after. Many bodies are never recovered. Currents carry them into open water or press them against underwater ledges at depths that place them permanently beyond the reach of any recovery operation. The Red Sea becomes a final resting place by default. This is not a metaphor. Divers have called it the world's most dangerous dive site and the graveyard of divers, not for effect, but as a factual description of what the site has accumulated over time. The blue hole kills those who choose to descend. The next location on our list requires no such choice. It destroys anything that approaches it at all, and the threat is not water, but boiling acid under open sky. The most hostile place on Earth is also one of the most beautiful, and that contradiction is precisely what makes the Danakil Depression so dangerous. Located in northeastern Ethiopia, this is officially the hottest inhabited region on the planet, with an average annual temperature exceeding 34 degrees Celsius and summer peaks that push past 60. But heat alone does not explain why scientists come here wearing respirators and why even seasoned guides refuse to stop walking. The Danakil sits where 3 tectonic plates are pulling apart simultaneously, tearing the crust open from beneath. That geological violence has left a landscape more than 120 meters below sea level, riddled with active hydrothermal vents and an intricate volcanic system still very much in motion. Superheated water forces its way through a fractured salt crust, and pools on the surface in shades of yellow, green, and corrosive orange. The colors are the first clue that something is deeply wrong. In several of these pools, pH levels approach 0, the chemical equivalent of concentrated sulfuric or hydrochloric acid. Skin contact causes immediate chemical burns. Above the pools, fumaroles crack the earth and release continuous plumes of chlorine, sulfur dioxide, and hydrogen sulfide. These are not merely unpleasant gases. At sufficient concentration, they dissolve the mucous membranes lining the respiratory tract. The Afar people have navigated this environment for thousands of years, harvesting salt from the evaporating lake beds with methods unchanged since antiquity. Their knowledge is the only reason outside visitors return alive. Danakil is where the planet stops performing for cameras and reveals its actual, unmediated self. Volcanic, acidic, toxic, and indifferent to anything living that wanders in without preparation. Our next location conceals its threat differently, not above ground, but deep below the surface of a Mexican desert, where sunlight never reaches. A cave that was sealed for 500,000 years nearly killed everyone who entered it, and then sealed itself again. That is not metaphor. That is the Cave of Crystals beneath Nyos mine in the Chihuahua Desert of Mexico, number 5 on our list, and it is one of the most hostile places a human being has ever voluntarily entered. The crystals themselves are almost impossible to process visually. Selenite columns up to 12 meters long and weighing up to 55 tons lean through the darkness at impossible angles, the largest natural monocrystals ever found on Earth. They look like frozen lightning or the ribcage of something enormous. They are, in purely scientific terms, extraordinary. Formed over hundreds of thousands of years inside a chamber filled with mineral-rich thermal brine, growing at a rate so slow it barely registers as movement across a human lifetime. But here is the paradox that defines this place. The same conditions that grew those crystals will kill you within minutes. The chamber sits roughly 300 meters underground, and the temperature holds at a constant 58 degrees Celsius, with 100% humidity. That combination does something specific and fatal to the human body. Normally, breathing cools you. Air passes through the lungs and carries heat outward. In the Cave of Crystals, the air is so saturated with vapor that this process reverses. Your lungs cannot shed heat into an atmosphere that is already beyond capacity. The body's primary cooling mechanism simply stops working. Without a specialized refrigeration suit, ice packs against the torso, dry air fed directly from external tanks, a person loses consciousness in 10 to 15 minutes. Researchers who studied the cave worked in strict rotations, 20 minutes inside, 40 minutes of recovery outside, not a guideline, a hard physiological ceiling. The cave was accessible for decades only because the mine's pumps continuously removed groundwater from the surrounding rock. In 2015, when silver extraction was suspended and the pumps were shut off, the thermal brine began rising again. The crystals are now fully submerged. The chamber has closed. No one is going in. It is still there, 300 meters down, unchanged, just unreachable. From a place of lethal, silent heat buried underground, we move next to a landscape where the hostility is written across the open sky. The Danakil Depression in Ethiopia, the hottest permanently inhabited place on Earth, where acid lakes glow in neon colors and the air carries the smell of sulfur and death. Over 1,700 people died without hearing a sound, smelling anything unusual, or having even a moment to react. Lake Nyos in northwestern Cameroon killed in complete silence on the night of August 21st, 1986, and the most disturbing part is that the lake itself looked completely normal while it did it. The mechanism behind this mass death is known as a limnic eruption, and it begins not with fire or tremors, but with chemistry. Beneath the floor of Lake Nyos, a crater lake sitting atop an extinct volcano, magmatic rock continuously seeps carbon dioxide into the water column. Under the enormous pressure of deep water, that gas dissolves rather than escaping, the same way carbonation stays locked in a sealed bottle. For decades, the lake absorbed it. Then, on that August night in 1986, something disrupted the balance. Most likely a landslide or a temperature shift, and the system released catastrophically. A single massive bubble of gas erupted from the depths. The lake detonated from within. Scientists estimate that more than 1.5 million tons of carbon dioxide burst into the atmosphere in minutes. Because CO2 is heavier than air, it did not rise and disperse. Instead, it poured down the surrounding hillsides like an invisible flood, draining oxygen from every valley and hollow below. The villages of Nyos, Kam, Su, and Fang lay directly in its path. People died where they were, in beds, on roads, in fields. Roughly 3,500 livestock perished alongside them. Survivors who had been at higher elevations came down to find their communities wiped out, with no visible cause and no physical destruction. Investigators later established that the nearby Lake Manoon had undergone the same process in 1984, 2 years earlier, and largely unnoticed. The pattern was already there. No one had the framework to read it. Today, vertical degassing pipes installed on the lakebed slowly bleed off the pressure building below the surface. The engineering buys time. It does not eliminate the risk. Nyos remains active, and the gas keeps accumulating. This is number 4 on the list of places where natural death arrives without colour, without warning, and without a sound. The birds here don't decay, they calcify. A swallow dies on the surface of Lake Natron in northern Tanzania, and within hours, the water begins turning it to stone. Feathers locked open, claws frozen mid-grip. Every detail sealed as if cast in plaster. This is not myth, it is chemistry. The lake sits at the base of the active volcano Ol Doinyo Lengai in the Great Rift Valley, and the volcano is the reason for everything. Through underground springs, it continuously pumps sodium carbonate and other minerals into the water. The result is one of the most chemically hostile environments on the surface of the planet. pH levels reaching 12, comparable to household ammonia. Water temperatures in certain zones climbing to 60 degrees Celsius, and in the dry season, a crust of crimson and orange salt crystals coating the surface. That colour produced by halophilic cyanobacteria, the only organisms that can survive here. Sodium carbonate is not a random villain. It is the same compound ancient Egyptians used for mummification, natron, the material packed around bodies to draw out moisture and harden tissue. When any bird or bat makes the fatal mistake of landing in these waters, the lake performs the same ritual automatically. The body is infiltrated, preserved from within, and encased from outside. British photographer Nick Brandt documented the results in 2013. An eagle with wings spread wide, thrushes standing upright, swallows in perfect stillness. The images circled the globe. Lake Natron became shorthand for beautiful death. But the same caustic water that calcifies the dead protects the living. Roughly 2 million lesser flamingos, the entire East African breeding population, nest here and nowhere else. The paich that would strip the skin from a mammal simply keeps predators away. Chicks hatch at the edge of the most corrosive lake on the continent. And that is precisely why they survive. This is planet Earth, ranked third among its own extremes, a place where death and reproduction share the same toxic water, where the mechanism of preservation is identical to the mechanism of ancient burial, and where the quiet chemistry of a volcano shapes everything above the surface. The same planet, in 1986, would demonstrate another version of quiet chemical catastrophe, this time in Cameroon, where a lake simply breathed out and everyone nearby stopped breathing in. The water is boiling, not near a volcano, not inside a geothermal park with fences and warning signs. In the middle of the Amazon jungle, surrounded by ferns and moss and mist, runs a river that reaches temperatures between 80 and 100 degrees Celsius. That is number 2 on this list of Earth's most lethal places, and its existence should not be possible according to any straightforward reading of the geological map. The nearest volcano sits 700 kilometers away, and yet the Chennai-Timpishka River in the Peruvian Amazon has been doing this quietly and continuously for as long as anyone can remember. The name comes from the Ashaninka people who live in this part of the rainforest. They call it the river boiled by the heat of the sun. That is not scientific explanation, but it captures something true about how the place feels. The scientific explanation came later when geologist Andrés Russo made the first systematic study of the river. His conclusion? Superheated water rises through deep tectonic faults from far beneath the Earth's surface, creating a geothermal river system that ranks among the largest of its kind anywhere on the planet. The mechanism is rare, the scale is extraordinary. What the camera shows you first is deceptive. Dense white vapour drifts across roughly 6 kilometres of water. The banks are lush and close, thick with soft green growth. There is something almost peaceful about the image. Then you learn what happens to anything that falls in. The proteins in the lens of an eye coagulate on contact. An animal that slips into the water does not struggle for long. The river does not drown, it cooks. The Ashaninka shamans have always treated this place as sacred, believing that spirits guard it and punish intruders. That belief has a practical edge. The deep jungle surrounding the river gives no warning. There are no visible barriers between the forest and the water. Animals wander in, the river receives them. For Chennai-Timpishka, every arrival is the same. There are no survivors, no second chances, no exceptions. Just the slow curl of steam above water that has been silently lethal since long before anyone thought to study it. At least 9 divers have died inside Jacob's Well, and not one of them looked dangerous before they jumped in. That is the defining fact about this place, and it is the reason it sits at number 1 on our list. Jacob's Well is a spring in Wimberley, Texas, tucked into the limestone bed of Cypress Creek in the Texas Hill Country. On the surface, it is stunning. A near-perfect circle, roughly 11 feet across, pushing up water so clear and blue-green it looks digitally enhanced. On hot summer days, families picnic on the banks, tourists leap off the rocks, and photographers shoot the kind of image that ends up on travel blogs with captions about hidden gems. Nothing about the scene suggests a trap. The trap begins about 30 feet down. After a near vertical shaft drops 10 meters, the cave opens into a series of 4 horizontal passages, each one progressively tighter and harder to navigate than the last. The limestone here has been forming for millions of years, and the system extends more than 30 meters below the surface. In certain sections, the walls close to exactly the width of a human body, making it physically impossible to turn around while wearing a tank. That alone would be enough to kill. But the cave adds a second mechanism: silt. The floor is layered with a fine sediment so sensitive that a single kick of a fin suspends it instantly into a dense white cloud. Divers call this a silt out. Within seconds, visibility drops to 0 in every direction, arm's length included. There is no up, no down, no visible passage out. The psychological component is what completes the trap. Each chamber looks reachable. Each turn looks like the last one before open water. By the time a diver understands the return path is gone, it is gone. The bodies of several victims were never brought out. Texas authorities have closed Jacob's Well to diving multiple times over the decades. Today, diving is officially prohibited without a special permit, and the land is managed by a non-profit conservation organization. The spring still pushes cold, clean water up through that dark hole in the rock. It is still beautiful. That is precisely why it kills. More than 200 divers have descended into Jacob's Well or Dahab's Blue Hole and never came back up. Not because they were reckless, because these places are engineered by geology to kill, and they do it beautifully. 13 locations exist on this planet right now where nature operates without a warning system. The rules that apply everywhere else simply don't apply here. Mount Washington in New Hampshire recorded a wind speed of 372 kilometers per hour in 1934. That's not a hurricane. That's not a tornado. That's an open summit where the atmospheric pressure gradient becomes a weapon. There's no shelter. There's no warning window. There's just force. Everest holds its dead like a museum. Over 300 bodies remain frozen on its slopes, many still wearing the bright jackets they had on when they died. Removing them is nearly impossible above the death zone, so they stay. They become landmarks. Climbers use them for navigation. The mountain is simultaneously the highest point on Earth and its most inaccessible graveyard. Lake Nyos in Cameroon killed more than 1,700 people and thousands of animals in a single night in August 1986. No fire, no earthquake, no flood. A limnic eruption released a suffocating mass of carbon dioxide that rolled silently across the ground. Villages were found the next morning with every living thing dead. Berkeley Pit in Montana is a different kind of catastrophe, one humans built deliberately. A copper mine abandoned in 1982, now filled with water so acidic and so loaded with heavy metals that it functions as a slow-moving ecological disaster with a surface you could almost mistake for a lake. The boiling river in Peru reaches 91 degrees Celsius. The Crystal Cave in Mexico incapacitates you in 15 minutes without a cooling suit. Natron's alkaline waters turn animals into mineral statues. The Strid in Yorkshire looks like a stream. It has a 100% fatality rate among those who fall in. These aren't anomalies, they're the planet operating normally. Subscribe, the next list gets closer to the edge.